The wind howls across barren rock. Salt spray lashes against a shelter made of whale bones and brush. Inside, a woman sews cormorant feathers together with sinew, her hands moving with practiced precision. She is alone, completely alone, and she has been for 18 years. This is San Nicolas Island, California. The year is 1850. 70 miles from the mainland, this windswept rock sits isolated in the Pacific Ocean, so desolate that a century later, the U.S. Navy would consider it as a testing ground for nuclear weapons. The woman inside the whalebone hut is the island's only human inhabitant. She hunts seals with weapons she crafted herself. She drinks from water jugs she wove from grass. She sings songs in a language no one else on earth still speaks. Her birth name is unknown. History would call her Juana Maria, though she never answered to it. The Catholic priests who baptized her as she lay dying gave her that name. But in 1835, when her people left this island forever, when she made the choice that would define her life, she was simply a Nicoleño woman, a mother, and she was about to become the last of her kind. This is a true survival story. Every detail that follows comes from historical records, archaeological evidence, and documented testimony from those who found her. This is the story of the lone woman of San Nicolas Island. San Nicolas Island is 8 miles long and 3 miles wide at its broadest point. It rises from the Pacific like a fortress of sandstone and volcanic rock, its cliffs dropping sharply into churning waves. The island sits exposed to relentless winds that rake across its surface, bending the sparse vegetation nearly horizontal. There are no trees, no natural sources of fresh water during most of the year. The landscape is dominated by sand dunes, rocky outcroppings, and endless colonies of seabirds. In winter, storms lash the island with brutal force. In summer, thick fog rolls in from the ocean, wrapping everything in cold, damp silence. The only abundant resources are those the sea provides: seals, sea lions, abalone clinging to rocks in tide pools, and the occasional whale carcass washed ashore. Archaeological evidence discovered in recent decades confirms what the woman already knew. This island could sustain human life, but it demanded everything from those who tried. The Nicoleño people had lived here for at least 10,000 years. They had developed sophisticated techniques for survival, harvesting shellfish, dehunting seals, weaving baskets so tightly they could hold water, building canoes from driftwood and seal bones to trade with neighboring islands. But by 1835, the Nicoleño were nearly extinct. The psychological weight of such isolation is difficult to comprehend. 70 miles of open ocean separated San Nicolas from Santa Barbara. On clear days, you might see the distant outline of other Channel Islands, but never the mainland. Never another human face. For 18 years, the woman would wake to the same howling wind, the same barking seals, the same crushing solitude. The year was 1811. Russian fur traders, accompanied by Alaskan sea otter hunters, arrived at San Nicolas Island. The Nicoleño had traded peacefully with neighboring tribes for centuries, but these newcomers had not come to trade. They had come for sea otter pelts, these which commanded enormous prices in China and Europe. Historical records from Spanish authorities document what happened next. The Russian hunters attacked the Nicoleño people. Contemporary accounts report the massacre of Nicoleño men and the rape of women. When Spanish officials finally intervened, arresting a Russian hunter named Boris Tasarov, only a handful of Nicoleño men remained alive, and the sea otter population had been devastated. For the next 2 decades, the surviving Nicoleño struggled on San Nicolas Island. Their numbers dwindled. Disease, likely introduced by contact with outsiders, took its toll. By 1835, Franciscan friars at Mission Santa Barbara learned that fewer than 20 Nicoleños remained on the island. The missionaries sent a schooner, the Peor es Nada, Spanish for better than nothing, to evacuate them. Captain Charles Hubbard arrived at San Nicolas Island in 1835. According to multiple historical accounts, he found the remaining Nicoleño living in difficult conditions. Most agreed to leave immediately. A storm was approaching, and Hubbard wanted to depart quickly. The Nicoleños boarded the ship in haste, But as the Piores Nada sailed away from San Nicolas Island, someone realized that not everyone was aboard. Accounts vary on exactly what happened next, but historians generally agree on the essential facts. A woman, possibly the woman who would become known as Juana Maria, either jumped from the ship or was left behind. Some testimonies suggest she realized her young son was still on the island and leapt into the water, swimming back to shore. Other accounts indicate she never boarded at all. Our recent research published in the 2000s uncovered native Californian testimony, suggesting she voluntarily stayed behind after her son refused to board the departing ship. Captain Hubbard's ship reached Santa Barbara. The evacuated Nicoleños told mission authorities that someone had been left behind. Several rescue expeditions returned to San Nicolas Island over the following months, searching for the woman and child. They found no trace of them. Years passed. Then more years. The woman became a legend, a ghost story whispered among sailors and mission Indians. Some claimed she must have died. Others insisted they had seen smoke rising from the island. The Nicoleños who had left San Nicolas began to die, many succumbing to diseases like dysentery and measles within the mission system. By the late 1840s, witnesses report that none of the original evacuees survived. The Nicoleño language died with them. And on San Nicolas Island, a woman survived. Historical records cannot tell us exactly what happened in those first hours and days after the woman found herself alone. But archaeological evidence discovered at multiple sites on San Nicolas Island provides remarkable insight into how she lived. Whether she was left behind deliberately with her son or returned alone, she faced immediate challenges: food, water, shelter. The island provided these things, but only if you knew where to look and how to extract them. Researchers have identified a large cave shelter on the northern coast of San Nicolas, where the lone woman most likely lived, at least during part of her isolation. Inside this cave, archaeologists in the 2000s discovered layers of ash and bone, grass basket fragments, and evidence of sustained habitation. She chose her shelter strategically, protected from the worst weather, close to seal rookeries and tide pools. George Nidover, the captain who eventually rescued the woman in 1853, recorded detailed descriptions of what he found. According to his published account, compiled in the 1880s from his own testimony, the woman had created a remarkably complete survival camp. She had fashioned water containers from woven grass sealed with natural tar that washed ashore from oil seeps on the ocean floor. These flagons could hold enough water to last through dry periods. She collected rainwater when storms came, storing it carefully. For food, she hunted seals and sea lions, killing them with a spear she had made from driftwood and sharpened stone. Nidover's crew observed her technique firsthand. She was skilled and efficient, approaching the animals with patience and striking with precision. She had built up a large pile of seal and sea lion bones near her shelter, evidence of hundreds of successful hunts over the years. She fished using hooks she carved from seal bone and lines made from twisted sinew. In tide pools, she harvested abalone, mussels, and sea urchins. When wild ducks migrated to the island, she caught them. Archaeological analysis of bones found at Nicoleño sites shows she knew how to process every part of an animal. Nothing was wasted. Perhaps most remarkably, the woman created clothing that astonished her rescuers. When Nidover's crew found her in 1853, she was wearing a dress made entirely of cormorant and seagull feathers, sewn together with sinew thread. Contemporary descriptions note that the dress was very beautiful and expertly crafted. She had also made a skirt from sealskin and fashioned footwear from sea lion hide. As months turned to years, the woman did more than merely survive. Evidence suggests she maintained practices that preserved her sanity and humanity. According to Nidover's account, she sang regularly. When his crew encountered her, she sang for them, songs in a language they could not understand, but which appeared to bring her joy. Historical observers noted that she was a happy soul and sang whenever she felt like it. She kept the shelter clean and organized. Nidover described finding grass baskets arranged carefully. Tools hung on the whalebone frame of her hut, a fire pit ringed with stones. These are not the actions of someone merely clinging to life. They suggest routine, order, perhaps even contentment within unbearable circumstances. Recent archaeological research has revealed that the woman moved between several sites on the island, possibly following seasonal patterns as resources became available in different areas. She knew San Nicolas intimately, every seal rookery, every productive tide pool, every source of fresh water during brief rainy seasons. If the woman's son had been with her initially, and recent testimony suggests he was, at some point she became truly alone. One account recorded by mission authorities states that the woman told Nicolas her child was killed and torn to pieces by the wild dogs with which the land is overrun. Other research indicates her adult son died after being attacked by a shark or killer whale while in the ocean near the island. Wild dogs did roam San Nicolas Island, descendants of dogs left by the Nicoleño or possibly brought by earlier visitors. These animals posed a genuine threat, competing for resources and potentially attacking a lone person. Whether she was overlooked by rescue ships that came searching in the early years remains uncertain. The island's frequent fog and vast coastline could easily hide a single person who wasn't actively signaling. But accounts vary on whether the woman wanted to be found. And if she had lost her son, her last connection to her people, perhaps the grief made it impossible to leave the place where they had lived together. Ships did pass near San Nicolas Island periodically. Russian and American hunters occasionally stopped to hunt seals, but the woman remained hidden or was never seen. For 18 years, the Pacific winds carried no answers back to the mainland. We know from historical records that during these years, every single Nicoleño who had been evacuated to Santa Barbara died. Disease swept through the mission's native population with deadly regularity. A priest recorded the death of the 3,997th Chumash, neophyte, at Mission Santa Barbara in 1841, just 6 years after the Nicoleño arrived. The Nicoleño themselves succumbed one by one to dysentery, measles, and other illnesses. The woman on San Nicolas Island didn't know this. She couldn't know that her language was dying, that her people were disappearing, that when she sang her songs, she was the last person on earth who understood the words. The physical challenges never ceased. Every winter brought storms that could destroy her shelter. Every summer brought the risk of drought. She aged. Her body bore the cumulative strain of nearly 2 decades of hard labor, hunting, processing kills, maintaining tools, walking miles across rocky terrain to harvest resources. But she endured. Day after day, year after year, she maintained the routines that kept her alive. She woke with the sun, checked her water supply, tended her fire, hunted or gathered food, worked on clothing or tools, sang her songs. And then, in the summer of 1853, everything changed. Then Captain George Nicolas was a fur trader and hunter who sailed the California coast in search of sea otters. By 1853, the otter population had largely been depleted, but Nicolas continued to explore the Channel Islands for other opportunities. In late August of that year, he decided to investigate San Nicolas Island. Nicolas had heard the stories of the lone woman, though like most people, he assumed she had died years ago. But as his crew explored the island on August 17, 1853, they saw something unexpected. Footprints in the sand. Fresh footprints, human footprints. They followed the tracks across the island. Near a seal rookery, they found a basket recently used to collect shellfish. And then, approaching a structure made of whale bones covered with brush, they saw her. According to Nicolas's published account, the woman did not flee. She stood near her shelter and watched the men approach. When they came close, she began speaking to them in a language they had never heard, rapid, urgent words that might have been questions or explanations, or simply the sound of a human voice addressing other humans for the first time in 18 years. Nicolas had brought several mission Indians with him, hoping they might be able to communicate with the woman if she was found. But none of them understood her language. She seemed confused by this, speaking to each of them in turn, perhaps hoping to find someone, anyone, who could understand her. The crew spent several days on San Nicolas Island before attempting to take the woman to the mainland. During that time, she showed them her daily life. She demonstrated how she hunted seals. She brought them to her water sources. She sang for them. songs that made no sense to the listeners, but which clearly had structure and meaning. Nicolas noted in his account that she seemed pleased by their presence, laughing and animated. She allowed them to examine her shelter, her tools, the feather dress that would become one of the few physical artifacts of her time on the island. When Nicolas indicated that he wanted to take her to Santa Barbara, the woman agreed. Whether she understood where she was going, whether she hoped to find her people again, whether she was simply tired of being alone, we cannot know. But on September 1st, 1853, she boarded Nicolas's schooner and left San Nicolas Island forever. The crew called her Better Than Nothing, a grim echo of the ship that had left her behind 18 years earlier. The woman arrived in Santa Barbara in early September 1853. News of her rescue spread quickly through the city. Santa Barbara had transformed dramatically since 1835. The gold rush had brought an influx of American settlers, and the former Spanish mission town had become a bustling American city. Nicolas and others brought the woman to Mission Santa Barbara, where she was placed in the care of Captain and Mrs. Russell. Contemporary newspaper accounts report that crowds of curious onlookers came to see her. People asked her to sing her incomprehensible songs. They marveled at her feathered dress. They brought her coffee, which one observer noted she enjoyed, and liquor, which reports say she was very fond of. But something crucial was missing. No one could understand her. Missionaries sent for Chumash people who had once traded with the Nicoleño. They couldn't understand her language. They brought Tongva people from Santa Catalina Island, thinking the geographic proximity might mean linguistic similarity. The Tongva couldn't understand her either. The woman appeared to try desperately to communicate. Historical accounts describe her speaking at length to various visitors, sometimes seeming frustrated when they couldn't comprehend her words. One can only imagine what she might have been trying to say. Where are my people? What happened to those who left? How long have I been gone? She adapted to some aspects of mainland life with apparent delight. Observers noted her fascination with horses. She had never seen such animals. She watched the city with what witnesses described as curiosity and pleasure. And despite 18 years of solitude, she had not, as some contemporary accounts romantically suggested, reverted to wildness. She was and had always been fully human, maintaining her culture and dignity even in total isolation. But 7 weeks after arriving in Santa Barbara, the woman fell ill. Historical records from Mission Santa Barbara indicate she contracted dysentery, a disease that killed thousands of Native Americans who lived in or near the mission system. Her body, conditioned to the isolated environment of San Nicolas Island, had no immunity to the diseases circulating in the city. On October 19, 1853, as she lay dying, Father Francisco Sanchez baptized her. He gave her the name Juana Maria. It was written in the Santa Barbara Presidio burial registry, the only place that name appears in connection with her, or she died the same day. The woman who had survived 18 years of absolute isolation, who had hunted and fished and built and sung through nearly 2 decades of solitude, died 7 weeks after her rescue from complications that might have been prevented. She was buried at Mission Santa Barbara. Her gravestone would later include a plaque reading, Heroine Wrangell Island Expedition. Wait, that's wrong. Wrangell Island was a different story. Ada Blackjack's story, decades later. Even the historical record, it seems, has struggled to keep the lone woman's story straight. Historical records confirm that Juana Maria was buried at Mission Santa Barbara in an unmarked grave. The location has been lost to time. Her feather dress, preserved for decades, was destroyed in the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. Most of the physical artifacts of her 18-year survival are gone, but the story remains. In 1960, more than a century after the lone woman's death, author Scott Odell published Island of the Blue Dolphins. The novel, based on her story but fictionalized, gave her the name Karana and told a version of her survival from a young girl's perspective. The book won the Newbery Medal and has sold millions of copies, introducing generations of young readers to the woman's story. Archaeological research continues on San Nicolas Island, though a 2015 project was halted after objections from the Pechanga Band of Luiseño Indians regarding the disturbance of ancestral sites. Researchers have discovered the cave where she likely lived, identified remains of her shelters, and analyzed artifacts that confirm the sophistication of Nicoleño survival techniques. In 2018, the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History unveiled a historically accurate portrait of Juana Maria, painted by artist Holly Harmon. The portrait is based on descriptions from people who actually saw her in 1853, an attempt to give face to a woman known primarily as an abstraction. Recent research has dramatically revised the traditional narrative. In the 2000s, scholars uncovered testimony from Native Californians who spoke with the woman through partial communication. These accounts suggest she was not simply left behind, but made a conscious choice to stay with her son when he refused to board the evacuation ship. They lived together on the island until he died as an adult, killed by a marine predator. But only then did she allow herself to be found. This revelation reframes the entire story. The lone woman was not a tragic figure accidentally abandoned by her people. She was a mother who chose to stay with her child, who survived for years in partnership with him, and who endured alone only after his death. Her 18 years of solitude may have been, for much of that time, a deliberate life with her son on their ancestral land. We will never know her birth name. We will never understand the words of the songs she sang. Her language died with her, the last speaker of Nicoleño, a tongue that had existed for thousands of years. But we know she survived. We know she crafted beauty in the form of a feather dress. We know she sang even when no one could hear. We know she maintained her humanity in circumstances that would have broken most people. And we know that when she finally had the chance to speak to other humans after 18 years, she spoke eagerly, urgently, trying to bridge the impossible gap that separated her from the rest of humanity. There is something profoundly human about the lone woman's story, not because she was primitive or wild or a child of nature. Those were the projections of observers who couldn't imagine survival outside their own cultural framework, but because she demonstrated what humans are capable of when everything is stripped away except the will to continue. She couldn't change her circumstances. She couldn't make ships arrive more quickly or make people understand her language. She couldn't prevent the extinction of her people or the death of her son. But she could decide how to face each day. She could choose to maintain order in her shelter, to sing her songs, to craft beautiful clothing from feathers, to survive with dignity and purpose. For 18 years, San Nicolas Island was her entire world. The howling wind, the barking seals, the crash of waves against rock, these were her only companions. And yet she endured not as a victim of circumstance, but as a person who adapted, who learned, who found ways to continue. That is the true measure of survival, not just staying alive, but remaining human in the face of inhuman isolation. Today, San Nicolas Island is a U.S. Navy facility, largely off-limits to the public. The caves where the lone woman lived still exist. The tide pools where she harvested abalone still teem with life. The winds still howl across the same barren rocks. But the woman who sang there is gone. Her language is silent. Her people are no more. If stories like this move you, perhaps it's because they remind us of our own resilience in the face of isolation, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual. The lone woman of San Nicolas Island could not save her people or preserve her language, but her story survived. And in that survival, there is a kind of immortality. She lived, she endured, she sang even when no one could hear. And that perhaps is enough.